Those who fight corruption should be clean themselves. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation, and our topic of discussion today revolves around corruption and good governance. Two different words, and then there are two different areas to discuss. Does it go hand in hand, or is it two sides of the same coin? On the 22nd of August 2017 marks 2 years since the coalition government came into an agreement to take forward good governance. I recollect prior to the 8th of January 2015 polls, there was a statement made that when they are elected to power, they would be taking to book and ensuring that those who are corrupt are brought before the law. It seems now that they have been entangled in the same statements that they made prior to the elections. We saw the resignation of individuals like Tilak Marapana over the avant-garde issue. We saw the resignation of former Foreign Minister Ravi Karunanika over the bond scandal. You saw authorities, individuals who are holding high positions in the government also resigning. Upul Jayasuriya, the BOI chairman, as well as the CEO of the Information Communication Technology Agency, Mukundan Kanage, just today. What exactly is happening with this government? Can they move forward like this? To discuss all this and more, we have four eminent personalities in the studio with us. Let me introduce them to you very quickly. Joining us this time, tonight on the show is Mr. Azad Salih, leader of the National Unity Alliance. Nice to have you on board. Also joining us this evening is Ashok Obesekara, Executive Director of Transparency International. Joining us this evening is also Attorney at Law Krishmal Varanasuriya, the Joint Secretary of the People's Intellectual Assembly, and also joining us this evening is also an Attorney at Law, Gihan Gunatilaka, Lead Researcher of Verite Research. Let's start off tonight's show with Ashok Obesekara, Executive Director of Transparency International. Also, given the promises made by this government just prior to the August 8th as well as August 17th parliamentary elections, what is the mood like right now amongst the people and NGOs like Transparency International and other civil rights activist organizations? What is the mood like right now?
Well, I think right from the outset, I mean, people speak about the January 2015 mandate and the sort of anti-corruption mandate. All in all, what we've seen, even with the general election also in August of 2015, is you've shuffled the deck, but ultimately all of the cards are still the same. So even though we have these mandates of anti-corruption, everything else, we've got all the same players involved here. So right from the outset, one should, I mean, obviously it's easy to say this in retrospect, but maybe we should have sort of tempered our expectations. But also, I mean, what we've seen even over the past week, what we're seeing is public accountability. So even with the resignation that we've seen over the last week of the foreign minister, we are seeing evidence which has come out in public, and as a result there has been a bit of a wave that has built which has led to his resignation. Now, I think the important point to distinguish there is that there are certain things which are political outcomes, but on the other hand, there are, for lack of better words, criminal justice outcomes. Now, what we've seen is a political outcome, a resignation of a cabinet minister, and that's significant. But really speaking, that is not what the public expected with this mandate of this government. And ultimately, we have not seen a single conviction of a senior politician. And I'm not saying that we require a witch hunt here, but all I'm saying is now, after 2.5 years of this government, we've seen very little progress. And I think this commission of inquiry, and we can discuss it at greater length, has given the public a taste of what it's like to see something being exposed. But actually whether justice will flow from that is a big question mark.
So given the Commission of Inquiry looking into the bond scam, many revelations were made, many exposures were made, and as a result of that, the former finance minister, the foreign minister, Ravi Karunaka, had to resign. But the question mark right now is, why wasn't such a commission appointed to look into the wrongdoings of the previous government?
I mean, it's a good point. And I mean, it's not, and that's not to say that that can't happen. And also, there was Pressifac, which was there before as well. But I think we should also remember that these commissions of inquiry, they're very strong investigative powers. But when we actually look at the outcomes of the commission of inquiry, and this particular commission of inquiry, when you actually look at the Commission of Inquiry Act, the one thing that's clear is that, okay, there is a recommendation that will come from it, and that's what it's mandated to provide. But very importantly, that Commission of Inquiry, the evidence which is collected by that Commission of Inquiry, can be used by the Attorney General in filing an indictment.
No, see, Ashok, I'm posing this question to you. Why? Because we saw Pressifac, the commission that was headed by Lassel de Silva at one point, also opened up for the media and the public.
Yeah.
And never did we see anything as detrimental as this. So what is the role of the investigators, in particular the Attorney General's department, on a situation like this?
Well, the AG's department has a very important role here. So the AG's department, I mean, is empowered to file an indictment based on the evidence which comes out of these commissions of inquiry. But I think one important distinction has to be made, and this is something which is very often forgotten. In all forms of alleged bribery, let's say, there are givers and takers. Now, the law regarding those who give, a giver can only be, the only offence is under the Bribery Act. And actually, the Bribery Act can only be actioned by Seabok. Now, I think one issue is that people now have a great deal of belief because they've seen this commission of inquiry, they're seeing evidence in the public. You know, they're hoping that something will come of it. But actually, when it comes to, let's say, holding a public servant to account, the AG's department, under the penal code, can hold a public servant to account. But for the giver to hold that person to account for potentially, allegedly, maybe even giving a bribe, that you have to still rely on the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption, Seabok. And there are, unfortunately, I think the public trust in Seabok has waned a little bit. And one thing that we have done is we have filed a RTI request at Seabok. And under the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, a big change happened at Seabok, which is that Seabok can file
Thank you very much.
Investigations of their own motion.
Thank you very much.
And actually, when we asked of them how many times they've used that power, they have not used it a single time. So there are challenges here, and but I'd be happy to go into them later. Thank
you very much, Ashok. Some interesting points indeed. I want to drag my attention now to Mr. Azad Salih, a leader of the National Unity Alliance. Mr. Salih, interestingly, Ashoka was talking about the giver and the taker of bribes. And I recollect the statement that was made by Dr. Harsha De Silva at the Economic Forum. He said, those who have given a bribe, please stand up. And then he said, quote unquote, shut up and then sit if you've done it. But my question at that point would have been, people are giving bribes because there are people to accept it. And only if you give bribes can you do something. In Sri Lanka, unfortunately, corruption is still rampant. Where is good governance and where is corruption? The time starts now.
Thank you, Samir. I think that program where Arsha questioned, I think this is a question that we must keep the 225 parliamentarians and ask, not the public, because the public is always the giver, because they want, end of the day, their work done. Today you see the local government without an election, so who is taking bribe, where it is happening, all this is openly seen. Why is the government so corrupt? Why is the bureaucracy so corrupt? Is a very big question. And to avoid all those things that we all strived hard and bought a new government, as to say, is going to have a new governance. Where is the new governance that we promised? Have we delivered it? No. Are we worse than what it was? I might say, to an extent, yes. 2.5 years, as you questioned and asked, what is the AG's department doing? All cases were transferred to the AG's department, and they say they have concluded on 90 or 82 cases concluded, but no directive. Where are we heading for? In this bond scam, 8,600 pages have been taken within no time. Why did it take 2.5 years to bring about justice to the already concluded cases?
But Mr. Salib, the Attorney General's Department individuals said that they did not go through all the 8,600 messages.
They didn't go through, but they have taken the time to take all the 8,600 copies. At least they have done that. But my argument here is they had time to bring in witnesses into the AG's department, coach them and bring before the Presidential Commission. I have a recording with me where they call upon a person who was asked to come before the commission. He has concluded his report and he was sent home by the commission saying that you don't need to come back. Now the police officer calling this particular person and saying meet the two people in the AG's department immediately. So he says, on record I have it, he says, sorry, I am not going to come. The commission has not summoned me. They have told me not to come. Only if the commission summons me I will go. And why should I go to the AG's department? Was his question. And he refused to go. So my question is the AG's department, like all the other people are today questioning the AG's department, is justice taking place there? Who is blocking justice at that point? Why a no confidence motion coming against the Minister of Justice now? Who is accusing whom? Government is accusing its own Minister of Justice for not doing justice. So but, this is the...
But Mr. Salib, is there a political tug of war, taking into account the preferential voting system that is happening when you really look at the two candidates? Because we see Vijayasa Rajapaksa also a Colombo district parliamentarian. You see Ravi Karunaika also a Colombo district parliamentarian. And now
Harsha is from Colombo district, Sujiva is from Colombo district.
So when you really look at it, you start thinking, is it political vengeance within the party itself that is taking place?
What I have seen is the coalition government. Because from the independence in this country, we have now seen two major political parties getting together and trying to do some work. But they are not together. They are always, both sides are thinking of forming a government of their own. But can this happen? No. Right? Now Mahinda Rajapaksa from one side has formed a political party. Only now recently that he has openly come out and said that I have a group within the SLFP and I have organized it. That is the group that is bringing the no confidence against the minister. So he came out openly.
Thank you very much.
But has the SLFP taken any action on that? No. That is enough to throw him out of parliament.
Thank you very much, Mr. Azad. I now move my attention to Gihan Gunatilaka, research director. I got it wrong in the first instance. Sorry, Gihan, who is also an attorney at law from Verite Research. Gihan, interestingly, I recollect the former Attorney General, when he was the Attorney General who was heading the AG's department, Yuvanjana Vijay Tilaka. Many said that he probably didn't act because he was appointed by President Mahinda Rajapaksa in the year 2014, 23rd of October. And then there was a new Attorney General who was appointed by the Constitutional Council, Jayanta Jayasuriya, who is still in office from the 11th of January 2016. What has been the role of the Attorney General's department in cases like this? Because we see it took 2.5 years. They have not been able to even indict anyone properly because we saw Basil Rajapaksa's case. It was thrown out from the Supreme Court. We saw the avant-garde issue. They could not file proper indictments. And you're trying to wonder, what has the Attorney General's department been doing? We saw Lalit Veeratunga's case. Again, charges were filed. It was thrown out from the court because it was not, the charges were not filed properly. What has been the role of the Attorney General's department over the last 2 years or so? Have they done their job right?
I think that's a really important question because I think there are two things that you have to think about when you're serious about anti-corruption. You ask the question, what does anti-corruption, what does a fight against corruption really look like? And I think there are two important things. First, the institutions that are mandated to fight corruption have to be resourced well. So you need resources on the one hand. On the other, the institutions that are mandated to tackle corruption have to have the strength and the capacity to carry out their mandate. So there has to be institutional reform when it comes to these institutions that are mandated in this fashion. So the Attorney General's Department is one of those institutions that is crucial in this context. But let's look at the Attorney General's Department. It has essentially two functions. On the one hand, it is representing and advising government. So it's, so to speak, the government's lawyer. On the other hand, it's expected to carry out prosecutions against government officials. Now, anyone can understand that there is a fundamental conflict of interest here. So the same department is expected to do two roles, which is completely contradictory. So there is a fundamental problem with the AG's department, and I think that has to be considered very carefully in the constitutional reform process, because other countries have coped with this problem by separating these two functions. You have the Attorney General usually as the advisor of the government, and then you have a public prosecutor who takes on the prosecutorial role. So fundamentally speaking, what we have here is a department that is inundated with a mandate that it cannot carry out effectively. So in order to really deal with this problem, we first have to look at the institution and decide on what kind of reform we have to bring in. And I believe the first piece of reform needs to be the separation of these functions. Once that happens, I believe that the Attorney General's Department has the human resources to carry out its functions. Some of the most hardworking professionals are in the department. And I honestly believe that those professionals are able to carry out their function if they're not inundated with the work that they're currently inundated.
But again, the accusation that has been leveled at the Attorney General's Department by many quarters, even those in the government right now, is that they're very slow. And in certain instances, like the bond scandal that we see right now, where the prosecutors are very stern, have done their research, you start wondering they're doing a pretty good job. And when you say inundated with cases, it doesn't really look like it.
I think it's important to understand that the Commission of Inquiry that we are talking about is an ad hoc institution that is mandated by a political actor and controlled by a political actor. Now, one has to ask the question as to whether this is what proper anti-corruption should look like. Because commissions of inquiry are fundamentally political bodies, because it's the president that determines the mandate and it's the president that controls that mandate. Now, the problem with commissions of inquiry is that they are temporary, and also there's an evidential problem. So the sort of evidence that emanates from these commissions cannot be directly used in prosecution. Even though the files can be transmitted to the Attorney General's Department or the FCID or the CIABOC, they have to carry out the investigations all over again in order to meet the usual evidentiary standards. So in a sense, you're duplicating the efforts that need to take place when it comes to these institutions, which is why I say that the work is a lot. And having looked at the evidence before a lot of these commissions, I think it's reasonable to say that there have been some efforts to introduce some cases and make sure that there are prosecutions, but that those efforts are extremely slow, and now you have a delay. And I think the problem has a lot to do with the fact that the institutions are ad hoc, and we're not channeling resources into the very organizations and institutions like CIABOC and FCID that are mandated to carry out these tasks. Okay. Attorney General's Department is one of those institutions, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Gehan Gunatulaka. I now move my attention to Attorney at Law Krishmal Varnasuriya, Joint Secretary of the People's Intellectual Assembly. Mr. Varnasuriya, when you really look at the statement that was made by Ajit Nivard Kabral, the former governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, he says that he is willing to come before the Presidential Commission of Inquiry on the Treasury bond scam. Now, I want to draw a parallel to this statement that he has made recently or this morning, and to the statement that Dr. Harsha De Silva made in Parliament. He says that in 2011, 2012 and 2013, when they invited Ajit Nivard Kabral to appear before the COPE committee, he failed to do so. I'm trying to wonder, What is the former governor of the central bank really thinking? He could not appear before the COPE committee back then, but now he is willing to come before Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the bond scam. Isn't this hypocrisy? What is this?
Yeah, that's a fairly direct question on a particular point. Can I get to it while I deal
Yes,
with
please.
this subject of corruption in itself, Shamil? I'll come to it very quickly. What I've been listening to my colleagues, all three of them, and your question, I think we need to go back and think, why does corruption flourish in our society? I see very quickly 4 points that I put my mind to when you told me this topic. One is, I think it's a huge vicious cycle. One thing, the most important, I think, there's public apathy to this. Our public are not, I don't think, are interested in corruption other than talking about it at the roadside or the boutique or the coffee shop. They are not actually interested in doing something about curtailing corruption. Now, there are reasons for that. But as all of us agreed on this point, there are givers. For the public officials to take a bribe or an act of corruption, engage in an act of corruption, we give. There may be reasons why we do that, but we give. So, we remember that we are also part of the problem. We are part of this problem. Then, economic exigency. If you look at 90% of our social strata, I believe a vast majority, give me the facts if you all have, live beyond the poverty line. They hardly can't find food to eat in the night. So when they come home, that hard man having done 2 or 3 jobs to find at least his money to send his child to school, comes home in the night, he has enough worries to think about, other than those of us in Colombo who have the time to even watch programs like this and discuss it. They have other things to think about than some man having taken millions in an apartment in Colombo 7. You follow? For that man, this is such a huge dream world, he can't even approach it, so he lets it go. That's another reason. The third reason that I think is the dependency of the giver. You see, we have now politicians and our political office have made a system where we don't give the fishing rod, but we go and give fish. Now, if you look at each time we have a flood or a commotion or a calamity, I mean, it's very funny, 21st century we are living. 3 months before we have floods that isolate so many people, thousands are affected. Then 3 months later we have a drought. So we haven't found a way of getting this water to the people who need it. And then each time it happens, our leaders, politicians, everyone goes and gives fish, bananas, roti, bunnies. So we have put up a system where people are always depending on us to get. Now when that system flourishes, corruption is rampant, because you would expect to be given rather than finding a way to come out of it. And the best example is, look at Sri Lanka cricket. What's happening today? For the first time, we have had a whitewash in a series. People are talking of corruption in our cricket. Now this is apolitical. No? Everyone loves cricket in this country. We are called a cricket mad country. People are talking of Indians coming over and investigating our players' toilets for SIM cards to ensure that calls are not made the night before certain matches. What are we doing about it? Absolutely nothing. So we are also part of the problem. Very quickly, the answer to the question you posed me, as to whether Harsha actually invited this gentleman to the COPE or the COPE did it, I am not aware of, so I can't comment on that. But if they did, and if he is now willing to go up and to the Presidential Commission and give evidence, it may be because, Shamir, don't forget, at the COPE, we had a problem with footnotes. Remember, there was one branch.
I'm talking about the year 2011, 2012.
Well, if the year 2011, 2012 COPE that you're talking about, I am unaware whether he was invited. But as to why he wishes to go before the Presidential Commission, he may very well have his reasons. And I don't see any harm in asking the man to come and say what he has to say.
No, but my question is very simple. Now, this very man could not calculate the money that Sri Lanka lost from the Greek bonds, but he has very well done a calculation with regard to the bond scam. Isn't it quite...
Very much so, because we are still looking at personality variables. Don't look at Ajit Niwad Cabral. That's what I say. Don't look at Ajit Niwad Cabral or what Harsha said or what anyone else said. Look at the issue. The issue is the Greek bonds have to be investigated as well. And like all three of us agreed, for 2.5 years, we have somehow failed to or neglected
but the question is very simple. Is the present joint opposition, who are part of the previous government, let's say the authorities, are they trying to use this situation that took place a few weeks ago and guise themselves as the good sheep in that entire lot?
Of course. And of course, that's very obvious. They are now trying to show that the biggest scam that has happened is the central bank scam. And everyone who is a corrupt or anyone who's involved in bribery are those people who were involved in central bank scam, as if nothing has happened before. The Greek bonds, the golden horses, the palaces, the hotels, everything has been forgotten. But don't forget, as Azad said, 2 years ago we got down on a road and fought to bring in a government to investigate these issues. And the problem is, what is the reason that that is not being done?
Thank you very much, Krishma Varansuri, Attorney at Law, also the Joint Secretary of the People's Intellectual Assembly. I open the floor for questions from our journalists. On to my immediate left is Attorney at Law Sonali Vanikabaduke, and on to my far left is Nadim Majid. Nice to have you on board, Nadim, after a lapse of 1 month.
2 months, I think.
2 months, okay. So let's start off with you. Yeah.
All right, thanks. Good to be back. Gehan, I want to start with you. You were talking about the role of the Attorney General. I want to draw your attention to a document which was leaked from the Attorney General's department shortly after this government came into power regarding the avant-garde issue. I'm sure you would have read it. It was, well, the AG's department never confirmed the authenticity of the document, but it was signed by by current Additional Solicitor General Vasantha Ratna Bandar regarding the avant-garde issue, and where he had said that basically there is a prima facie case here. Even that being such a huge issue in the country at the time, there's been no progress beyond that at the AG's department. Is there a conflict of interest within the AG's department in deciding on which cases they're going to pursue? Does it appear that way to you?
I can't comment on that particular document because I think the authenticity of the document is still disputed. But generally speaking, as I said before, there's an institutional problem. And that institutional problem has a conflict of interest embedded in it. Because you cannot be an advisor and representative of a government at the same time be expected to prosecute on behalf of the state government officials. Because fundamentally speaking, you're thinking about corruption, you're thinking about government officials, because corruption is defined that way. So I think that is still a problem, and if you do see inertia on the part of the AG's department to prosecute because of certain conflicts of interest, it's a fundamental issue. It's at the institutional level, and that has to be resolved by reforming the constitution. So I think that's one of the major gaps in the conversation on constitutional reform. It's the reform of the AG's department. And I hope that this entire experience, when it comes to anti-corruption, opens our eyes to that problem. So that is one problem. And as I said before, the other problem is that we're relying on ad hoc institutions. And if we rely on institutions that are temporary, based on politically sort of designed mandates and control, we cannot really overcome what Krishma spoke about, that culture of corruption. We cannot overcome it because we are relying on ad hoc institutions. In order to overcome it, we have to have standing institutions, and we have to have systems in place. We have to have institutions like CIABOC and FCID really being resourced and supported. I mean, the CIABOC DG, I believe, is well respected and completely capable. But the fact of the matter is that the government is not supporting him. If you look at the budgetary allocations from 2016 to 2017, for some reason, 500 million was allocated in 2016, and you wouldn't guess how much was allocated in 2017, 15 million. So you have to ask the questions, what's going on with the actual institution that is mandated to deal with corruption? Why are we relying on presidential commissions of inquiry to deliver this anti-corruption and transform this culture when these commissions are politically appointed? What you're going to get is political show and tell, and that's what we have right now.
Krishma, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here. Gehan was talking about how these commissions are basically political show and tell. You were famously involved in the tribunal which convicted Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca. What's the difference between this commission of inquiry and that tribunal? Aren't they both political tools?
The arrest was political, but there, Nadeem, the court martial is appointed under the Army Act. His Excellency the President has powers to appoint a court martial. But there, of course, we took up the position. That was a technical question.
But again, what I'm saying is, it was politically motivated.
You can't draw a parallel. Because Commission of Inquiry, yes, it's once again by His Excellency the President under the Commission of Inquiry Act. But here there is a certain issue that have been placed before the commission, as Jan said, with a mandate, limited mandate, find out whether something went wrong in this central bank bond issue on that day or 2 days or whatever. Their court martial was investigated under the Army Act. Any person who is subject to military law can be brought before a court martial. So slightly different.
Do you agree with Gehan and Asoka then that this commission of inquiry is insufficient and that there must be, or with Asoka rather, that there must be a criminal justice outcome at the end of it, and that, you know, the commission is basically political show and tell? As
I won't disagree with the fact that it is a politician, that is His Excellency the President, that has appointed the commission. But I would not therefore say that the commission is political. Two different things. You see, the commission has two Supreme Court judges in it and a senior public officer, and we would expect them to give an apolitical determination.
And the President has a mandate to do so as well.
And a mandate to do so as well. But overall I agree with both of them for this reason. We are not looking at the Attorney General's Department's problem, as this gentleman very correctly said. The Attorney General's Department can't all of a sudden stop all the other work, say in a high court. Now we appear in court every day. We appear again. I'm not trying to defend the AG's department, but since none of them are here, let me just say, all of them come to court with huge bundles of files, yeah? And they have a list that's given to them from their senior officer. Now they can't suddenly decide, I'm going to leave all these files aside and prosecute one particular case unless you are given that mandate. So like Gihan said, if you don't worry about Presidential Commission of Inquiry, put up a new court structure. We put up the commercial high court because the commercial people were complaining that the cases are dragging. We put up shipping and admiralty courts because shippers were complaining. You can't have ships restaurant kept at Colombo for 3 years without releasing the ship. So if we can do those things, put up special courts to deal with special kinds of situations, why not this? There have been rampant issues of corruption that have been alleged. Bring the charge sheets, have the indictments filed, get judges if you want, recruit judges, and all.
But there has been talk of special courts. I remember
Yes, so
2 years ago, State Minister of Finance, then Deputy Minister of Public Enterprise Development, Eran Wickramaratne, spoke of the need for special courts.
Yes.
The Prime Minister himself
That's
spoke of
right.
the need for special courts. Right now,
So
the
let's
word
look
in the
at why
government
that-
at least
that's
is that
what
the
the
Justice Minister is not allowing
He's
it to
opposing.
happen.
Now
He is
I don't-
opposing.
Yeah, we are told, it's reported that he is opposing it.
Yeah.
But I don't now see, that's a joke, no. Now I'm sorry to say this to His Excellency the President. His Excellency the President can't be heard as the head of the cabinet, head of state, who has all this power to come out and here. Why don't you give me these things and I will do and show? Or he can't be heard to come and say the minister is not doing. His Excellency the President is the head of the cabinet who makes appointments.
No, but
if
as a result of
wait,
that-
let me finish.
Yeah.
If someone is not doing their job, remove him and put someone else.
But Mr. Narasuri, as a result of that only we saw the governor of the central bank, Arjun Mahendran, leaving.
Yes.
The Prime Minister requested for an extension for Arjun Mahendran,
Yeah.
but the President said no. That's
Which
not
was
going to be
good.
done.
That was a good decision.
And because of that, when there was a public outcry on the bond scam, the President came and said, no, I want to appoint a presidential
Yes,
commission
so
of
that was
inquiry.
a good decision. But one good decision
he-
does
he
not
has
put a
stand his
white
ground.
cloth over several bad decisions.
Yeah,
but
but-
that's not, take issue after issue. That was a good decision. Not extending the term of office, putting up a commission of inquiry is a good decision. But similarly, His Excellency the President can't be heard to say, one of my ministers are not doing their job of putting up courtroom, therefore there is nothing we can do. There are several things that you can do. Remove the man, put someone else. That's
An
good.
example, even the resignation of Ravi Karunayaka,
Yeah.
it was reported that it came purely on the pressure exerted by the President even during the cabinet meeting, saying
Yeah,
that...
so I can't comment on because I don't know what the President exerted on Ravi Karunayaka or whether it was the
it
other way
was- it
around.
was reported across
But,
the- across
if it was
all
reported,
media,
it may have been reported, but I don't want to cast an opinion on it. But what I'm trying to say is, Excellency the President has and the Prime Minister now, after the 19th Amendment, decisions with regard to ministries are taken by both the President and the Prime Minister. So they can get together and say, look, this man, forget Mr. Vijayadhar for a moment, let's say some other ministry is not doing his job, say cleaning up the streets. This man is not doing his job, we have given him 2.5 years to do it. Remove him, put someone else in place. There is nothing in law stopping it. What I am trying to say is, don't try to hoodwink the people by going, there is nothing I can do. This man is not doing his job. There are several things that you can do that the law permits you to do. Change the minister.
Mr. Sa, yes.
If I could just sort of add something to the two points that have just gone before.
Right.
Krishmal mentioned the two Supreme Court judges sitting on this commission of inquiry. I think one slight concern is that ultimately, and Gihan also mentioned, I mean, it is a political body. When I say political body, in the sense that people serve at the pleasure of the President on this commission of inquiry. And the President taking two sitting Supreme Court judges and them serving at the pleasure of the president, when it comes to the sort of fundamental tenets, democratic tenets of separation of powers, things like that, the idea of pulling out two senior the Supreme Court judges to serve at the pleasure of the president, I think there is a small question mark which may need to be addressed. One other thing, maybe just maybe a point of, dare I say, disagreement with Gihan, is that under Section 24 of the Commission of Inquiry Act, actually the evidence which has been brought before the Commission of Inquiry can be used to by the Attorney General to file its indictment. So arguably there, this need to duplicate investigations could actually be avoided.
I mean, bypassing a police investigation.
Indeed. But still, I mean, there are still concerns about how the Commission of Inquiry may be conducting itself. Final point is really on this point of conflicts of interest. The one issue in all of these things is that when someone turns around and says, my goodness, I didn't know, right? You know, there needs to be certain systems by which people can, if they want to, even declare an interest. Now, in the present state, there's no way that any politician can declare an interest. So there are lots of people who do things legitimately. There are lots of people who may get funded to go overseas for to go and see what's happening in a particular country, all of these things. Yeah. But now there's no way for them to actually declare that interest, so that and so as a result, every single time this nexus of business and politics interact, it will always be met with public mistrust because there's no way of declaring it.
Ms. Saleh, when you look at the last 2.5 years in which this government has been in power, we saw Tilak Marapana, the former Minister of Law and Order, resigning over the avant-garde issue, saying that there was conflict of interest. And then you had Ravi Karunaika, the then Finance Minister, the Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka, resigning over the bond scandal. And we saw Upul Jayasuriya also resigning on a corruption.
Was he asked to resign? I think the letter was sent to him to resign.
Right, and then you had Mohandan Kanage also resigning, the Information Communication Technology Agency CEO. But my point is very clear. A resignation does not simply mean that is the end of the road. There has to be investigations. There has to be accountability that this government ministers should take, because we now see Tilak Marapana is the Minister of Development Assignments now. Isn't it quite astonishing? You know, you resign and you had the former finance minister saying, I'm resigning with a lot of pride. I'm trying to wonder and figure out,
Samir, as he just
is it all right to say something like that and get away with it after that?
As he mentioned, the entire bond scam, if you see, what I feel, even this inquiry, without having any legal binding, is not going to help us. Now, I saw your program last week where Govind Jayasuri was here, very clearly told something. What was that? He said, there is a mandate given to this commission, and if things are deviated from that, that can lead to the entire findings of the commission can be squashed by Supreme Court. Right? So, I had a fear, and I asked this question at a press conference also, is the government or the Aegis department trying to do that? Because several commissions had been totally set aside by the Supreme Court. So, now how did this start? I think when the President was at the Commonwealth, where I was also there, we heard this news of this bond scam. President called the Secretary and said, come on, tell the media that I am coming out with a commission. Before the press release went from the President's office, we got a call saying that the Prime Minister has appointed 3 members of the UNP into a committee.
No, that's not how it happened.
Let me
First of all, the President issued a statement, because I was reporting on this matter. The President issued a statement, and the next morning, the Prime Minister appointed a 3-member committee. And
that's what I'm saying, trying to say.
Before,
because when I was there with him, he told me, see, this commission was to be appointed by me. Prime Minister has already taken the lead and appointed a committee. Now, that committee found nothing. Right? And what happened?
No,
Again,
the committee did find that there were irregularities that took place.
No, but
and
not like
henceforth
this, no.
That
Not
a
like this,
forensic
no.
investigation needs to be conducted. That
Yeah.
was the conclusion of this particular committee in question. But unfortunately, the Prime Minister did not take a stand.
This is what I'm trying
and
to
take
say.
and do a
Because
forensic
that was,
investigation
that
at
was
that
not a
time.
proper commission. Then what happens? Again a commission has been appointed. Now we are just wasting time. As he very clearly mentioned, we are just wasting time because end of the day, are we going to get this whole thing squashed in a Supreme Court case? Is my point. But what did we do for 2.5 years? First and foremost, now we knew all the corruption that took place for the past 11 years. What did we do? Where is the special trial at bar? What did we promise? That was a promise given to the masses that all these cases will be taken up, priority will be given, all these fellows will be arrested. But nothing happened. Why? It's because of this national government. Don't forget that. Because you have two parties sitting together and nobody has a clear majority in parliament. Now each person has to depend and somebody else is playing the ground for both. It's Mahinda Rajapaksa. He has just 50 members of parliament with him and he talks to both parties, keep both parties in the balance. One party is saying bring back Mahinda. One party says immediately sack. Their own SLPs are today telling, we saw on your television, asking for the resignation of the SLP General Secretary. Who appointed him? The President. So
No,
a nationalist
but the point
MP who is a defeated person comes back as a minister on a ticket given by the President and he tells the President that your appointment as Secretary is no good, we want him removed because Mahinda has to come back. Then the other side says, by December we are going to have a government of our own. Right? This is the problem. This is the conflict of interest that is going on. Because all the corrupt guys who lost elections have been given a seat today and they are back in base. And you see, edging. What happened to edging? Where is the case? Who is the minister who was involved? Who is the same minister who bought dirty fuel into this country? Even the former leader of the opposition was paid 50,000 rupees for his vehicle that was damaged due to that petrol. Where is the case? Where are the cases of all these corrupt people who are today in the government? This is where you must start with. But where did you start? You started with the ministers in the government. We are not saying no, that should be done. But where is your priority? Whom are you giving your priority?
No, but the question mark is if someone is corrupt, then investigations
Now
have to
you
be
started
conducted.
by saying that, no. What did you say, Shamir? You said anybody, the people who talk of corrupt are corrupt. Fine. Now for instance, just see the Constitutional Council. What is this body? Earlier, who was in the Constitutional Council? There was a Constitutional Council? No. It was the President of this country who decided on all the appointments. And just single appointments he made. Nobody was there to question. But today, you have the Constitutional Council.
After 19th
Huh?
After 19th
After the 19th Amendment. Now, who are these people who are sitting? Who will appoint him? President appoints. Now, how many members of the Constitutional Council are having cases? How many members of the Constitutional Council have gone and hit and run? How many people in the Constitutional Council are having cases when they were ministers? How can they sit? Can they make an appointment sitting in the national in this nomination board? No. So we are in a country where appointments are made by one individual again.
Asoka, quite interesting remarks made by Mr. Azad Saleh talking about the corrupt activities that took place in the previous government and those in this government are also corrupt. Now the question to you is, what have you all done as a civil rights activists and even organizations? It seems that you all have not done anything concrete or anything visible or anything that would make an indelible mark in the mind frame of the people of this country. You all have failed.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's always work to be done, and maybe I can give an illustration of that, because here, what I have now here, in these, for the first time in the history of this country, this is more than half of the entire Parliament's asset declarations. Now I can tell you that if I'm allowed to show you what's in, if I show you what's in these, well, first of all, I'm liable to a 2,000 rupee fine and/or 2 years of rigorous imprisonment. But if you see in this, these sorts of cases that we've been seeing over the last few weeks and those sorts of revelations, there is a minefield of all of those sorts of cases that you will be able to derive from looking at these documents. Now, one thing that we have been working on is trying to get this sort of information into the public domain, so that the public can get that information, they can speak about it, they can share it, the media can talk about it and share this sort of information. And what's the situation at the moment in that? There is a cabinet, in cabinet at the moment, there is an amendment bill to the Declaration of Assets and Liabilities Act, which will empower the public to access all of this information. But where is it? It's being slept on. No one knows anything about it, no movement in it for the last best part of a year. You get that document out there, which is something that we have worked on considerably. That is what will empower citizens of this country. So in that sense, I think we have been working. And if this sort of information is out there, because you know, everything that we have seen over the last a few weeks has all come about because this information is in the public domain.
Ashok, are you trying to say that if you give me that information that you have there,
yeah,
that you will fine 2,000 rupees and 2 years of rigorous imprisonment? Am I correct?
Yeah, and/or. So, I mean, unfortunately, the thing is now...
my question is very simple.
Yeah.
Are you saying that if you give me that information that is there with you, you will be fined 2,000 rupees and 2 years of RI?
Yeah, you see, the thing is, I don't get to choose whether it's 2,000 rupees or 2 years rigorous imprisonment.
Now my question to Gihan is, my question to Gihan
is, MPs these days are getting only the
2,000 rupee fine.
No, indeed,
I
think that's the problem, because now just 2 weeks ago, there was a case that was on the front pages of all newspapers about former Honourable Member of Parliament Sarana Gunawardena, and the fact that he was given a 1,000 rupee fine.
2,000 rupee fine.
But he was also liable to, it was and/or the imprisonment as well. But for some reason, at every juncture, when it's someone who's politically connected, they get away with the 1,000 buck or 2,000 rupee fine.
But is it even fair? Because now you trying to give something on the public's interest can be fined 2,000 rupees and 2 years of rigorous imprisonment, and the individual who is found guilty of such fraud gets away with just 2,000 rupees.
Indeed, but then I would also be guilty of an offence for publishing this, for releasing this information.
Don't publish it, give it to us.
Yeah, no, but this is the crazy thing. Every single person who's watching this has a right to this information.
No, but the problem
and they can request it as well. But we can't talk to each other.
Again, my
request. We will do it that way.
Again,
give it to us. We will go.
So the point is, you have the documents. You have the documents. But you can't do anything about it. So, what's the point of having civil rights organizations that can't do anything about having a file with them?
That's why, under the Right to Information, we are currently before the Right to Information Commission to get this sort of information out at this very moment in time. And that's something that's ongoing at this moment. And we know that once we get it under the RTI, then the RTI is not bound by all of these secrecy provisions. But you can see there is a real, I mean, you know, you go to India, the moment that you file your nomination paper, you give your asset declaration, it gets scanned, it's on the web, anyone can see it. There is a real lack of, I mean,
an attempt to hide information.
Yeah, and the one thing is that everyone who's in the political game, they are all on the same page about not wanting this information out there. One person I would say is the exception is the Speaker of Parliament. The Speaker of Parliament has provided this information. We have requested the same information from the President. He has not given us that information. When we reminded, he hasn't given us that information. And I would say that I've been working on this for years. Under President Rajapaksa, when I asked for this information from President Rajapaksa, within 2 weeks, I got the information. And under the new president, I don't have that information. So, I mean, there's a big question mark there.
I'm surprised that, as Mr. Sahil said, there was no white van parked outside the house. Again, when you really look at the statements that were made by Asoka, Krishmal and even Azad on matters of corruption, when you look at other countries, let's take Pakistan for an example, the resignation of the Prime Minister after the Supreme Court decided that he is not fit to hold the post of Prime Minister. He resigned. Then you had
Korean president.
the Korean president. Then you had the Australian minister, the trade minister, who wrote a note saying that he accepted a bottle of wine from absolutely. And you see the ministers in Sri Lanka, they resign. Of course, you see Tilak Marapana and Minister Ravi Karunanak resign. But now, when you look at the precedent, you had Tilak Marapana resigning, and then following a cabinet reshuffle, he comes back again as the Minister of Development Assignments. I don't know what he's supposed to do, but because you have 4 ministers doing the same job. And the fear now is, will the former finance minister also come into play again? It seems like that because there is no minister yet, foreign minister yet.
I think you've hit the nail on the head because, as I said before, this is political show and tell. And when you rely on a presidential commission of inquiry, I disagree with Asoka about duplication of tasks, and I'll come to that later. But
I'm happy that you are disagreeing again.
I promised him that I'll say I disagree with him once today. You do have this problem of not having criminal justice that really puts away the person who's corrupt. All you have is these gestures, these symbolic gestures of compliance, only to wait for the heat to die down so we can come back. And that has been the precedent. But I don't think the answer to any of this is to get the hold of the asset declarations of these MPs. I'll be hard-pressed to believe that you will find MPs disclosing their corrupt dealings in their asset declarations. That's not going to be the route to any of this.
Absolutely.
There needs to be a culture change.
So you mean to say that Asoka is not doing his job? He's just
Asoka is doing his job, certainly, and I think
asset declarations and not doing anything about it later.
No, that's not what I meant at all. What I mean is that you cannot rely on the asset declaration as a document to change this culture, but certainly by inviting people to take an interest in an MP's financial declaration, you are creating that demand. And I think that is what we need right now. And of course, Asoka is free to approach the Siabok. Even though he can't disclose it to you, he's not barred from going to Siabok if he finds something that is amiss. But I would be surprised if he did, because I'm sure corruption is a lot more complicated and sophisticated than simply saying that these are my corrupt dealings when you prepare a asset declaration.
I think I need to give you an opportunity to talk as well now. Gihan is saying that having those files right in front of you, the papers, are not good enough. Just because you have them, you can't prove that they are corrupt. And it seems right. And he's making a very valid point. He's saying that you can go to the Siabok. You don't have to give it to us. You can go to Siabok, but you've not done it yet.
Well,
he might.
No, but
very quickly, like 20 seconds.
But what I would say on that is that on one side, there are 2 angles here. On one side, many of these asset declarations go into a great deal of detail about how people are able to be in the political space. Many of the things, I mean, let's say there are certain things which are considered societal ills. You get a good understanding. I'm not casting judgment, but you start understanding how people are able to engage in day-to-day political activity. On the other side, you have lots of people who will see someone's son driving a brand new Porsche, and yet when you see their asset declaration, you start realizing that they've declared that they've got 5 purchases of land somewhere and nothing else. So lots of inferences can be made. In any case, if you go onto these gossip sites and everything else, people are making inferences anyway. This actually gives them an opportunity of anchoring their inference on something.
Thank you very much, Asoka, for your thoughts. We, of course, will give an opportunity to Sonali to pose questions after we go in for a short commercial break and come back on our Q&A. But just want to give some recollection to our viewers who are watching the show tonight. Just a few weeks ago, Sarana Gunawardena parliamentarian was fined just 2,000 rupees for failing to declare his assets. We saw a similar situation on the 7th of April 2017 as well. Dominda Silva was fined 3,000 rupees for failing to declare assets. Is it time now at least the Parliament gets their act together rather than bring the 20th Amendment of the Constitution, start thinking of bringing new laws to ensure that the nation is corrupt free? Is that just a dream? Is that just a dream? We're going for a short commercial break. At the end of the day, miracles do happen. Let's hope for a miracle to happen in Parliament. We're going for a short commercial break. Stay connected. Stay with Face the Nation. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. I start off the third round with Mr. Azad Sali, leader of the National Unity Alliance. Ms. Sali, you know why Asoka Obesekar left that right in front of you? You know the reason?
For me to take it.
Absolutely. So he won't be liable for anything.
I know.
Anything.
I'll pay him the 2,000 rupees also.
Ms. Sali, now you say that civil rights organizations need to take the lead. I have seen you being very vocal at press conferences. I remember you having a press conference every week, every Tuesday.
Yeah.
And you were voicing your concerns about how corrupt the government was. But none of it were heard. Everything fell on deaf ears. And even fell on deaf ears. And even now, you're making a huge cry about corruption. And nothing concrete is taking place.
Not only me, Samir, tomorrow, the 159 organizations that got together to bring this government is coming to the streets at the Viyarmadi Park at 3 o'clock tomorrow to mark the 2 years, completion of 2 years of this good governance government and not fulfilling the pledge given to the masses. That's why we call upon everybody, all of you all here and the media, everybody to come and see what we are asking for. We can't bring in another government. We have strived so hard to bring this government and to have democracy within it and the promise that they are given to the masses to at least fulfill those things. So that is why all these organizations are coming together tomorrow at the Viyarmadi Park.
No, but you can come and you can protest and you can make a huge cry
That's
and
all
voice
that
about it. But what is the alternative? What is the alternative? Okay, you're fighting. You're saying that this nation has to be corrupt free. Okay, I understand. But what is the alternative? What is the alternative?
Alternative is not to bring another government. You can't bring because you another set of rogues that you are bring because they are waiting for that. That is why they are holding placards inside Parliament. They are more worrying is to come back to power. The people who went back who were thrown out, all defeated fellows want to come back.
So if there is no alternative, why fight about it?
No, not. It's not a question of alternative.
What is the question then?
We've got an alternative.
What is the alternative?
That alternative, the good governance government, is going on the wrong track. We have to put them back to the right track and tell them, yeah, come, look, you're going on the wrong track. This is the track that we want you to go. And let us bring that pressure that which your station is doing. Likewise, the other civil societies, the PIA, Krishmal, we are all there. We are all striving hard to put this right. Because today, end of the day, whatever said and done, Samir, you have a peaceful sleep.
Don't you think?
You have a peaceful sleep. We want this to continue. But we have to put them right. Corruption, no. No to corruption.
The last 2.5 years, you've tried. Don't you think that this government is beyond repair?
No. I don't say that. We can do it. Still you have hope. Because now it's only the president, like he said, the president is the head of the cabinet. He simply has to remove. Now that has started. Now you would have seen the president of the cabinet also told about the law and order minister. All these cases that are pending, last 2.5 years, nothing has been heard. He very well clearly told the Prime Minister and the Minister that I'll give you just 3 months if you don't perform. Give it to me, I will do it. Because he didn't want to pull it out immediately. He has given them the red light that you perform or get out. That he very clearly told them.
The President has also said at the President has also said at the last cabinet briefing that if it requires, he's even ready to appoint 10 commissions to bring those to book.
See what I'm saying? This has to happen. Even trial at bar. Like Krishmal said, how many court for the commercial they wanted, the commercial high court was put. Like that, there are cases that are there. Because end of the day, see, out of 5 years, 2.5 years is gone. Another 2.5 years more. How can you do it? You have to do something first. Now see, you saw Shiranti Rajapaksa being asked to come before the CID. She refused to go. She refused to go. So is this the answer? Like you said earlier, the governor was asked to come before the court. He refused. But now he is volunteering to come before the commission. Take him. Because more things to come out of him also. Take now, since he has given a statement out, you have got a good opportunity, take him and ask. What? Question him. You can question even the previous ones.
All these individuals who played the role of fox are now turning to be sheep.
Exactly. That is because they know that the government is weak. The government can't do anything. I don't know what arrangement. I have always said, no, what is the agreement between the UNP and the Rajapaksas? In the last 2.5 years, nothing has happened. Everybody know, the people who voted the UNP, especially the UNP, when we go on the street, ane maathe pissune kelo gatte. Make aparadhayak ni. Ung horakam karala ri monari penda tibuna ne karala.
But Misali,
said that. But today what?
Misali, I don't think it's right to just point the finger at any political party, because given your status, you are also a nationalist MP of the United National Party at the 2017 elections, and some may wonder your raising your voice because you were disheartened that you were not a member of parliament.
As I told you earlier also, I was the number 1 in Kandy in the provincial council.
Because there was another option
in the UNP.
Yes. Yeah.
I went there. I just left there and came. I was in the Kala Municipal Council as the second highest vote taker. I resigned and came. For me, I have always told you, it's not the position that I run behind. Position has to run behind me. This is my concept and my principle. So going to parliament is not a big deal. I never went behind anybody. If I had gone there, thank God I would have resigned and come by now.
Thank you very much.
That's the history.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sali. We'll have to, of course, wait and see when you're appointed a parliamentarian whether that's going to happen. But I will definitely hold you accountable for the statement that you made. Because you're saying this in front of 2 lawyers. You have Gehan and also Krishna.
But I will come.
You have Gehan and Krishna. So let's talk to Mr. Krishmal Varanasuriya, who's also interested in at law and the Joint Secretary of the People's Intellectual Assembly. Mr. Varanasuriya, when you listen to the statements that are being echoed with regard to corruption, I'm trying to figure out, have the people of Sri Lanka been misled and we've made the wrong choice? Your time starts now.
Thank you, Shamir. I think it's a very valid question. Perhaps the most opportune and important question we need to deliberate tonight, Shamir, is whether we, when you say people, I include us also. Because remember, 2015, let's not forget 2015 when all of us, we got on the roads to change a regime. That was not just a regime, no. There were talks of people disappearing, and as I've said previous time before, when we were coming back from those court-martial hearings, we had black helmeted motorcyclists following us home, no. So it was in those circumstances that we got on the streets, shouted and said that we need a regime change. And all of us know how we spent that election night. None of us were at home. We were all advised, I was in a hotel with my little family, my 2 children. Exactly. We were all advised not to stay at home because if the regime didn't change, we didn't know what will happen to us. So, I now wonder, your question, Shamir, were we all misled? Were we all part of a big sham for just another set to come into power? Now, if that is so, then the people of this country, I totally agree with Azad now. I do not for a moment think that politics or regime change is the answer forward. I tell the people of Sri Lanka, the right thinking people of Sri Lanka, do not be misled by what happened to us at independence by dividing us into green, blue or red and giving us another reason to separate other than our caste, other than our religion, other than our races. We got another reason to separate and hit each other and whack each other after election also every 5 years. Do not be misled by politics or politicians, because I don't think, however good, as you said correctly, whether they were sheep in wolf's clothing or wolves in sheep's clothing is a question the people need to answer now. On the 8th of January 2015 and August 2015, if we were hoodwinked, are we going to be hoodwinked again? I recently wrote to the press, and I'm glad that several people published it, all 3 or 4 papers. I say take an example of France, Macron, independent politics, individuals over political parties. Macron led a country to victory not coming from any known political party. People got behind him. Several months later, the entire party structure was demolished in France, just this year. And even those long, we were always saying it. At the PIA, we are telling the people to consider this. Even people from the traditional political parties took away their colours even in the advertisements. And now today's parliament that followed Macron's presidential election, a general election, we have normal people like you and me, school teachers, professors, intellectuals, enterprising people, they have all come in. Now, I think about 60 or 70% of the parliament are new faces.
We saw this in Canada as well.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Do not be misled by politicians again, and please don't cry for another 5 or 6 years saying, "Ayyo, we were misled." I am saying, get out of party politics. If you are still a hardliner of a party, insist on intra-party democracy, that you have a say in who is put forward for election before the elections come. Before some party leader decides on what list to put out based on their cricket colours or their acting colours or their TV colours or their Rupaini colours, you have a say in your party. If you really don't want to give up your party, tell the party leadership, no, we want to see what's the list you want to put out. We don't want to go and vote for some people, you tell us to vote for. We want to vote for the leaders we want. I mean, that's the way to go forward.
Interesting point, but given the history of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, you are also a nationalist parliamentarian of
a
the
nationalist nominee of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna. I was
right on top. Right? You were right on top. And
I was not a member of the party, Shamil. Myself, I was number 2. Number 1 was the former Auditor General. We were taken from outside, from civil society, because they wanted to bring in more people from the society to strengthen their party structure.
So my question to you is very simple. Were you not hurt as an individual? Because I asked this question from you before as well, on a previous show as well. At that time, right after the elections was over, are you not hurt? But I'm posing that question to you again now. Are you not hurt looking at the conduct of this parliament over the last 2.5 years? Do you think, I'm not talking about you, do you think that the parliament requires professionals to be there, like probably like Gehan or Asoka or individuals like that who are professionals in their own respect?
Absolutely, Shamil. It doesn't have to be professional qualifications. I disagree with that. But I have no personal hurt because I go back to court and practice law, no. So whether I go to parliament or not, it doesn't matter to me. I came on a list and actually, if you remember, 1 and 2 won the seats, no. Both Mr. Mazun and I won our seats, 1 and 2. But they decided to send 2 defeated candidates to parliament in our place. Now that's a decision the party must make. But I don't think I lost as a person. But as a country, we need to deliberate this point. Whether they don't have to be professionally qualified with a certificate. But there must be some decent people in society. It may be a senior media man. It may be a senior industrialist. It may be a senior civil society activist. You know, all of these people who have contributed something to society must be allowed the chance to go and make policy for the country. But at least, I think they must have at least some semblance of intelligence to understand what is law. Yeah.
And that is why the nationalist was introduced. In
of course. And also not just nationalist, Shamil, even the other 200 odd, they need to know why are we going to parliament. They don't go to parliament to run away with the Senko or the maze. They go to parliament to sit there during sittings and make law. You see, they make law. The executive branch, Prime Minister and Cabinet execute the law. The judicial branch, we interpret the law. But they must know why they go there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kushmal Varasuri, Attorney at Law, also Joint Secretary of the People's Intellectual Assembly. My question now is to Asok Obesekera, Executive Director of Transparency International. I'm posing a question to you that was just sent to me by a viewer. He says, the National Procurement Commission was established under the 19th Amendment of the Constitution. So far, no concrete set of rules governing public procurement has been promulgated. There are international standards in public procurement such as tender evaluation. And why hasn't the government really enacted the amendments that was brought forward in the 19th Amendment of the Constitution? Your time starts now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few things which are pending from the 19th Amendment. One thing is the National Procurement Commission, and I mean, having had an opportunity of speaking to one of the I'm not sure if he's still a commissioner. I mean, based on what he was telling me, he was needing to bring his own internet connection from home to be functional. So, you know, the National Procurement Commission was completely dysfunctional. There's also a National Audit Commission that had been set up under the 19th Amendment as well. Now, one thing which has been getting a little bit of coverage over the last few days is the lack of progress of the National Audit Bill. Now, the way in which, especially given the issue around public finance at the moment, the National Audit Bill is of paramount importance. It took an important place within the President's 100-day manifesto. It continues to be an important part of the government's manifesto now. And yet, where is it? There is an issue here. Because now, even with this national audit bill, it's about empowering the Auditor General. Because at the moment, there are a plethora of different laws which speak about how audits of public authorities occur. And the Auditor General performs his audit and files his reports he tables his reports in Parliament. Now the issue is that actually what we're seeing now is that we want the Auditor General and others to be empowered to act. Now whether if by giving them the power, whether that power will be used, things like that, that's another question mark. But the auditor, under the National Audit Bill, the Auditor General will get a few different powers, but one thing I'd want to highlight is the power to surcharge. And the actual wording within the National Audit Bill, I mean, actually, it speaks about if there is a fraud, willful negligence, misappropriation or corruption, there is personal liability for those responsible for that within the public authority. Now, there are certain question marks about whether that power should be given to the Auditor General or not, but there needs to be a public discussion around it. At the moment, the National Audit Bill has been lost, as with other bills that I've highlighted before, and really there needs to be a little like the RTI Act. The RTI Act had public consultation, and actually the RTI Act, the fantastic lesson learned from the RTI Act is that the initial RTI bill was not worth having as a law. You'd rather not have an RTI Act than have that. But after public consultation, the public and civil society building into that we have a very fine RTI Act. Similarly, the National Audit Bill needs to go through some degree of consultation to strengthen it and to ensure that actually this issue of public finance is addressed.
You speak of two acts. One is the RTI Act, as well as the National Audit Bill that are supposed to have teeth. But you see the government right now looking at the Exchange Control Act, the Inland Revenue Bill. Do you think these are important now, or what should be given priority at the moment? Is it the National Audit Bill or anything else in the pipeline for the government?
Well, I guess the one thing that I would say is that, I mean, underlying this government's mandate is this concept that they've actually tried to push in certain areas of open government. But the issue is this. I mean, we can speak of open government, but actually when you, let's say, look at the Establishment Code, which is the book which governs the public service, that the Establishment Code is actually anchored in closed government. Yet we have to rely on public servants who are anchored in closed government to run an open government system. So there will always be challenges. What we've seen even with the RTI Act, it has been encouraging. I mean, there are RTI requests which have unlocked certain information. I mean, the fact that the CIABOC, the Bribery Commission, has told us that they have never used their 19th Amendment power of filing an action on their own motion under RTI, I mean, that's a big thing, that the fact that they're willing to give that answer. The fact that the Elections Commission has provided us with all of the political parties' political financial records is a big deal.
Thank you very much, Asoka. We, of course, will get back to you in a minute. But I'm willing to give you around 15 seconds to respond to Gihan, if you wish to do it. Do you wish to respond to him?
Nothing to say, no?
about the files and you just having them and not going to the Commission of Inquiry, Investigation to look into allegations of bribery or corruption? I can give you 10 seconds.
Yeah,
if you want to pass it, I can just go to Gihan.
No. I'm sure that Gihan and I, because what Gihan said there was Gihan spoke about the need to change the culture around corruption, and the asset declarations alone won't do that. And I completely agree with him on that.
Thank you very much, Asoka. So Gihan, you won the battle there. So you don't have to respond to.
You're cheeky.
Asoka on that. Gihan, what is the role of Verita Research? Your organization is like a research body. I want to get a feeling of what the public's opinion is like at the grassroots, because we have a campaign that is going from district to district to every nook and cranny in Sri Lanka, which is called the Anti-Corruption Drive. But one thing is clear, everyone at the grassroots are disappointed. What is the feeling like? What do you all get from those in Colombo or the urban areas?
So what we do really, we don't do a lot of grassroots work, but
Yeah,
we do look
urban
at
areas at least.
we look at the media as a sort of lens through which we can analyze public sentiment, and we look at the particularly the Sinhala and Tamil media, and there is certainly a sentiment of disappointment and demotivation because the very reason for which this government was installed, that is bringing an end to corruption and ushering in accountability, has not been realized yet. But I think, now I've been very pessimistic so far, I want to be a little positive as well. I think there is a silver lining here. And I think it's important to understand that Yahapalanya, or good governance, for the first time very clearly has been detached from the government. The government no longer is the custodian of what we call Yahapalanya, because the government itself is being analyzed and scrutinized against this so-called rhetoric or this standard. The people now own Yahapalanya. And a lot of people at the very beginning said this government has come up with Yahapalanya slogan, but it's actually not the government's slogan. The government has found a slogan that resonated with the people, which means the people have been demanding Yahapalanya.
Again, a lot of people are saying it is not Yahapalanya, it's Gavapalanya now. You know,
that might be the government, but people are still expecting this government to conduct itself according to this standard. This is unprecedented. We wouldn't have had resignations en masse the way we did if not for this fact. And I think that's an important silver lining. And I believe politicians will be politicians. Now you can expect the politicians that were on the receiving end of this Yahapalanya thrust to be on the offensive. And I think that's not a bad thing. Because I think we want the government, and particularly the UMP, to accelerate its efforts against the previous regime, because that's the reason they were installed in power in the first place. So we want an accelerated project or agenda on anti-corruption that focuses on actors within the previous regime. We want to see them held accountable. So these presidential commissions of inquiry is not going to get the job done. This is where I say that a lot more resources and a lot more effort, a lot more attention has to be placed on the standing institutions like CIABOC. A lot more effort has to be placed behind the FCID, and certainly the Aegis department has to be reformed.
Again, when you really look at these standing institutions that you're talking about, I want to drag your attention to the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. One of the allegations back then was that the Human Rights Commission under the Rajapaksa regime was politicized. And now you see the Human Rights Commission acting on certain matters of public interest, but not getting the backing of the government itself.
That's right. And I think that's very unfortunate. Of course, the Human Rights Commission has a very specific mandate to deal with fundamental rights and human rights. But it has a very important mandate in terms of vetting legislation that may have a human rights impact. Now that is the mandate I think that is most important in this context, because there's so many pieces of legislation that is being prepared that have very dire consequences as far as human rights are concerned. I'll give a few examples, like the counterterrorism proposals. I've spoken to you about this before. The Media Council law, very serious, and I think we haven't spoken about that law yet, and it's important to highlight that law, because that law prevents the disclosure, or rather it can compel the disclosure of sources of a journalist on national security grounds. Now that has an impact on anti-corruption, because all public servants that want to disclose certain information will be dissuaded from doing so, because under our legal regime, national security can cover even economic affairs. And that's the opinion of the Supreme Court in the RTI bill determination.
And you're trying to say that whistleblowers will be suppressed.
Absolutely.
Their voices will be suppressed. So
that has a very serious impact on anti-corruption. If you want to encourage people to come out and disclose misappropriation and misconduct, you're certainly not going to do so with that particular law. So the Human Rights Commission has a role to play there, because the Human Rights Commission can vet bills and give advice to the government. It's been cut out of the system. It's never consulted on any legislation, and I think that's a serious problem.
Thank you very much, Gehan. Before I open the floor for questions from Sonali, one of the serious allegations leveled by Gehan to politicians is that politicians will always be politicians. Now, Mr. Sali, you're a politician. I think that Gehan pointed the finger at you also. you come and make promises, and then when you go back and when you go back and are elected to power, you won't do anything about it. You'll say, well and good, I'm elected now, and I would enjoy my 4 years in Parliament, get the vehicle permit that is given, go on overseas visits. I don't know, I have not seen you yet on overseas visit, but I've seen you a couple of times. I won't bring that to light, but again, politicians will always be politicians.
I am always open
rightly
for
directed
criticism.
at you, Mr.
I am
Sari.
always open. You can openly say if you have seen something. I have nothing to hide. But now, what Gyan said is the truth. I mean, politician, end of the day, they go and promise everything under the sun and then ultimately don't deliver. That is why we are also striving hard to bring pressure upon this government to please fulfill the pledges that you are given to the masses.
Because
not only
Mr. Sari, I'll tell you why I told you this, because you said that when the president was at the Commonwealth, you were also with him. So that's one example of you accompanying politicians in overseas visits. Yeah, because you told me I can be candid. And
yeah, no problem.
Yes.
Even last trip to Bangladesh,
Yes,
I was with
yes.
him. So let me not beat over the bush.
Yeah.
Now, the electoral system is going to be a good opening for everybody. Well, you see, previously when we had this ward system, you had your own representative. You had a lot of independent candidates sitting in Parliament, in the provincial councils. There were no provincial councils, the local government. Today, with this change and future elections, you can see a lot of candidates coming as independent and not as party. I just mentioned this to the president when I was talking to him, that no longer people are going to trust the SLIP or the UNP, but you will have more candidates coming because the people will always want Gamata Honda Putek. Gamata Honda Putek. So that is a new slogan, and we are also striving hard to bring them with us. That's the struggle that Krishmal, all of us are doing. So I think this electoral change will definitely bring some good people into these type of places. This is our try. Let us see, because as Krishmal said, you can see this happening in France, you can see this happening in Canada, all these places.
You say Gamata Honda Putek, you're not that puta, are you?
You know it better.
Yes, that's not you can.
Asoka, we're increasingly hearing of instances of corruption allegations against elected officials. How important is it for parliamentarians to be mandated to disclose their interests, given the recent incident which saw the resignation of the former foreign minister? Because we see that in countries such as the UK, there's an interest register. How important is it for the Sri Lankan parliament to also have a mechanism to have this in place?
I mean, I think it's important. I mean, this idea of declaring things, as these documents here, these asset declarations show, the concept of declaring things is not a foreign concept to us. From 1975 onwards, we've been in the habit of filing annual declarations. The interests declaration is a little different to an asset declaration. An asset declaration has your assets, your liabilities, going to the properties and the houses and the bank accounts and everything that you have. Interest registers are maybe looking more at, what sort of connections you have. I mean, do you have a particular sort of business dealing, or have you been given certain gifts, things like that. I mean, the whole thing is how are these things implemented. I'll be honest with you, I think interest register is pointless if it's not public. That's exactly the same thing that I feel with the asset declarations. I mean, really speaking, there's really no accountability that drives from this if it's not in the public arena.
Right. Also on a connected note, when it comes to election campaigns and businesses making monetary contributions or donations to politicians, most often than not, there are aspersions of wrongdoing that society tends to attribute. How can one get over this obstacle?
So this idea of an interest register can even include something that's useful for campaign finance, because let's face it, right? everyone who fights an election battle, I mean, it is such a illogical financial proposition, right? I mean, to get paid a pittance and to spend a fortune, I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. So it is key to understanding the interests that drive that. So, I mean, the idea of disclosing financial contributions not only during the election cycle but outside that. And the interesting thing about an interest register is that it's not only about the money that's given to you, because very frequently a third party will, let's say, pay for your printing of something.
Right.
You know, so it's about declaring all of those sorts of things. And the other thing is this: there are many people who very legitimately give money to people to contest. And there's nothing out and out wrong with that. But the whole thing is that there is no system that makes you feel like you're doing something legitimate.
So we need a system.
Indeed.
Right. Gehan, my next question is to you. We're speaking on corruption, fraud and bribery. How important is it to create a paradigm shift in attitude across the board, across Sri Lanka? Do you think that the anti-corruption mechanisms already in place are ineffective? Do you think we need law reform? Where do we really need to be headed in to sort of correct all of this wrong that's happening?
As I said before, I think there needs to be a transformation of the culture. So yes, a paradigm shift is absolutely essential. But how do we get there? And I think we have certain institutions in place that need a lot more capacity, a lot more strengthening. And I said before, they have to be resourced, and there has to be institutional reform. And that's what a serious, genuine, meaningful project or agenda on anti-corruption would look like. But I think the attitudinal shift that you talk about is a generational thing. It has to happen from the level of education. It has to happen from the level of, as someone mentioned, the giver, right? So it's also about the people not, or refusing rather, to engage in corrupt activities, bribery, and refusing to play within this system and navigate this system. So there's a lot that needs to happen. But you asked a specific question of law reform. I think there's one sort of, I don't want to say elephant in the room because that would mean a particular party. But I think there is one serious question that is not asked, and that's about campaign finance. And I think we need to reform our law in terms of campaign finance. Ashok already mentioned this. There's absolutely no transparency on who actually finances campaigns. And the world over, there have been reforms, and the trajectory has been to move towards transparency in campaign financing. And you mentioned the interest register as well. I think that's absolutely essential, because if you think about it, how strange it is for a minister or even an MP to have a business or a particular enterprise that they have direct connections with and then make law and execute those laws. That's such a serious conflict of interest. But we seem to be fine with that. We seem to be accepting the fact that politicians perhaps are not paid well enough, so they should be allowed to carry on those businesses because they have to survive too. Well, then increase their salaries and put in place systems that prevent them from having side businesses. Because the moment you do, you can never act impartially. You can never act in the interest of the country and have policies that apply across the board, because you're always incentivized to have policies that help your own interest and your own dealings. And I think those are serious things that we have to consider, and we have to ask ourselves the question as to whether what we have right now as a legal system is sufficient to deal with some of the fundamental problems in this culture. And that transformation will not take place until we deal with those problems.
Thank you very much. Mr. Asad Sali, we see a growing interest among the general public with regard to the large-scale fraud, corruption allegations that are taking place. Despite the technical nature of these white-collar crimes, for example, the central bank treasury bond scam, then the national payment platform issue, then controversy over the spectrum. So also during the island-wide anti-corruption campaign that we ourselves launched, we saw and we continue to see the public discontent and the disillusionment among the general public. So where do we go from here?
What I told you at the beginning also, people are totally frustrated. And it is not only your media, the entire media will have to come out. The entire civil society will have to come out and have a very, very strong campaign against this, because these are things that was promised to us. It is not delivered. Now they said all this corruption, all these things, murders, everything will be looked into. Even the past is not to be, even the present. What is the system we are going to adopt has still not been come out. So people are, as you say, we see on television your group going and meeting everybody, and now people are talking what are their opinion, we can see that. But this is the same opinion that we also have. People who died, strive so hard to bring this government to power, are still waiting for the government to come up with something. Now, as you said, on this asset declaration, we will take this. Why only MPs and members of parliament? There are a lot of people in the country who are very well to do. Nobody knows from where their money came. Why can't we just bring it to a point where you just put the identity card number, you will have how many properties this guy has, how many vehicles he owns, what are the houses that he has, everything can come in. Why can't you adapt a system? Where is the income tax files? How many income tax files did we have earlier during Mr. Mahindra Rajapaksa regime? Only 700,000 files with 21 million population, and now it is 1.4 million files. We suggested as this government came to power, we said let everybody have a file. Now when we take our children for a tuition, we only have to pay, we don't get a receipt. We take the child for a raga practice, we only have to pay, we don't get a receipt. So where are these parents going to account this money? You take him for elocution class, no receipt.
Why can't you demand for a receipt?
Then you have to take your child and go home. You can't demand. See how many classes that are taking place. Are they issuing you with a receipt? So because they are not covered by these things.
The system is geared.
This system is not geared.
Mr. Arasar, very interesting facts, just not parliamentarians or even ministers. There is a lot of people who are entangled in this net,
Exactly.
which we call. But I want to drag your attention to the resignation of Apul Jayasuriya as well as the ITCA CEO today. This just can't be the end of the road.
No.
Can it?
I was actually hoping one of you will raise that question. You see, resignations alone is not the answer to the issue of corruption and bribery.
Exactly.
It's very easy to, I don't want to say the word, but that 4-letter word has hit the fan, for someone to say, someone resign. We find a scapegoat, right? That scapegoat, as you say, will go and come in a few months. Now, that does not solve the problem. You need to get to the root of it. Why did this man leave? What were the allegations against him? Find that out, launch the relevant inquiries and make that disclosed to the public.
And get the money back.
Resignation, that's all problem, Swami. It's a cultural issue. We in Sri Lanka, we tend to smile at everything. Someone comes and hits you on the head and next day says sorry also. Okay, all right. No, thank you very much. Now, we have to get beyond that culture where I say, okay, he has resigned, fine, very good. Now stay at home. Now, why did he resign?
Absolutely.
Who put him there? Why did he have to resign? Who paid him or who did he pay? That must come out. And that's where we are going wrong. I tell the public also, please don't expect the few of us here, and your station is doing a lovely job, and the few people in civil society who are actually the time to do it, to go after these people. The common man in this country must take an interest in corruption, because it's your money, it's your public finance. That you must raise the questions. Talk to, without, when you see these fellows at a wedding who has come to sign weddings and funerals and all that, they go, no. Don't just go and smile at them and say, hello sir, how are you? Go and ask them questions. So who stole? Why did you steal? What are you doing about? Ask questions, pester them. Then they won't come for the weddings and we'll all have a peaceful wedding. But what I'm trying to say is, go raise questions. Ask them, because they are accountable. They are supposed to serve you.
Mr. Varnasurya, I actually have a question that was directed to me by a colleague in the print media, Shamindra Ferdinando, who's the news editor of the island.
Fighter for the cause.
He says that, you know, recently China provided 265 computers to MPs on the Speaker's request last month. Is this legal, especially in the wake of the accusation that the embassy interfered in Parliament over the Hambantota port deal?
Oh dear. Now, I'll take Shamindra's word for it that the computers have been provided and go on that report, but I don't have a personal recollection of that.
No, correct.
Yeah, so Azad confirms. Also, at the moment I'm appearing in the Supreme Court in the Hambantota port case, so I don't want to comment on the case angle. But if anyone, if our public service, yes, I'll come to the computer. I'll talk to the computer. Yeah. If anyone gave anything, now my colleagues on my two sides do a lot of work, and they were saying earlier that even a small gratification, someone spoke of a bottle of wine, I think Sonali spoke, some bottle of wine was also declared and some man had to go. So any act of gratification, if you look at the interpretation of the Bribery Act and the laws, any act that is meant to procure a service or an interest that is undue to you or not due to you legally can be a gratification. If the Chinese man had given computers and if you can draw that link from that computer of the Chinese man to something that you have got, then it's wrong. They must be prosecuted.
By that logic, does that also mean that allowing members of parliament to sell their duty-free super luxury vehicles could be considered a bribe given by the government
not a bribe,
in power?
But something illegal. Not a bribe. But remember, now recently we appeared for some doctors who haven't got permits, and so we went through the regulations in that permit. It's permit meaning you're allowing someone because of some service that you do to import a vehicle that is not subject to the normal Indian revenue and taxation conditions. That has conditions imposed on it. You can't convey it. You can't transfer it for this amount of years. You can't give it to someone else. Now, if you have brought this luxury vehicle and immediately sold it, what they do is they don't change the name till the number of years go. They keep it under that old name, but they get another contract signed because as Sonali knows and the lawyers here know, immovable property doesn't need to be registered. A contract can be signed by two lawyers and say, this is now yours. And that contract is valid in law. But I say it's invalid in law because you are contracting to do something illegal. You see, you can't contract to do illegal things in a country. For example, you and I can't draw up to contract to kill him. Because penal code says killing him is wrong. You follow? So if that's what they do. That's illegal. You must prosecute them. All the fellows that sold their cars must be prosecuted. We have to buy our cars with the tax.
And one thing to add to that is that when you look at the list of the people who have transferred the vehicles, and then and I think everyone has an understanding of the sort of market value of a car permit. Yeah. You don't see you don't see the sum reflected in the asset declaration. So that's just to
not only that. The most important point here is you are given a permit as you enter parliament. You are given another permit when you are getting out of parliament. None of you all know this. They get two permits.
Why is it?
When they enter parliament, they get one. Once they complete 5 years, when they are going out, they get one. That is for the election campaign. But that doesn't come to the campaign. Outsiders are campaigning for them. Then the other one is the taxpayers. The people who are paying very good income tax, they were given permits. 10,000 permits were given. What did the government do? They stopped those 10,000 permits. That is people who are paying for the country. Their permits had been stopped and these MPs permits were given. And no any number of CC. Right? Doctors, yes, this is your condition. Government servant, yes. Judges, this. The conditions and non-transferable.
Sonali, very quickly, yes.
Asoka, at the beginning of the discussion, you distinguished between the political outcome and the criminal justice outcome. And as Mr. Varnasurya correctly said, resignations have become very fashionable. So, how far away are we from really bringing wrongdoers before the law without being hoodwinked by mere resignations? Very quickly.
Well, I think we need to see progress. And I think one of the big issues is that no progress has really been seen. I mean, when you have an anti-corruption mandate and you do not see any anti-corruption convictions. Now, one thing I would add is that I think to placate the public interest in 2015 would have probably required a witch hunt. But after 2.5 years now, and no progress being seen outside, there's a concern. And I would say this. Now, Gihan spoke about the fact that we need to ensure that we have to differentiate between the established institutions and the ad hoc institutions. Right. Now, CIABOC is the preeminent anti-corruption institution in the country. FCID, all of these things, I don't think will last beyond the political mandate. But now, looking at things like CIABOC, they have something called the Section 17 about secrecy. I think that CIABOC can actually give out more information about, let's say, even the quantum of some of the cases before them. Even to give a sense of the momentum of some of the cases before them without giving out information about the specifics of the investigation. So I think there's a way that you can communicate to the public if there is anything happening without acting outside of the law.
How do we move away from corruption, Mr. Varnasurya, in terms of the role of the opposition in Parliament? How important is it for us to have a robust opposition?
Absolutely important, Sona. You come out. Wonderful question. Question: do we have an opposition in Parliament?
Exactly.
We don't have an opposition, no. We have a Parliament that we elected. One party, no one got a top mandate. One party got close upon a mandate, and they bought a few fellows over and made a government. Unfortunately, the fellows who came second have now joined the government. So the party who was supposed to be opposition and the ruling party are now one. Then now we have something called the joint opposition, which is a breakaway fraction of the fellows who came second, who are calling themselves as opposition. But they are not opposition leader. Opposition leader is actually a party that came third. Then the leader of the chief, what's Anu Kumar's designation?
Chief Opposition Whip.
Chief Opposition Whip has been given to another party. So this is not Westminster system Parliament. They can actually hold hands together and see the more we are together, the merrier will be. Because there is no opposition, there is no Westminster system, there is no Parliament. You need a robust opposition, Sonali. In Westminster style, you would have learnt, we say, an opposition that's breathing down the neck of a government, saying, you falter, I'm ready to take over. That's the role of an opposition. You have a shadow cabinet, a shadow finance, a shadow foreign. Where are these people? I am seeing shadows, but not shadow ministers.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your thoughts in first, second, third and fourth rounds. We're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's a final round. Gihan, even Krishma said if he has to, kill someone, he looks at you. And I'm trying to wonder, why are you on the spot tonight? We're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round. This is Face